Okay, back again. My video recorder seems to be struggling a little bit. I think I've overloaded it today with all the stuff I've been putting it through. But anyway, I've got upstanding tuft. Yeah. Okay, this one I think I'll title "Who Has the Bone?" and to primarily mention the concept of distraction. It does sort of link into previous video talking about where's the time and time consumption. The way this stuff will, unless of course you choose that, if you choose that option of just block and move on and go about your day, that's only taking a very, very small amount of your time. But other than that, it's that time consumption factor. So it's distracting you from doing other stuff. What were you busy doing before this thing popped up? What had you been planning to do before this thing popped up? Had you actually talked about that in a public fashion? For myself recently, this is something that I'm going to be attending to in the next few hours, hopefully, before dinner time. Anyway, it's just gone 1 o'clock at the moment here, 1300 hours GMT. But I had a few times now recently talked about setting up a community page on the dreaded Google Plus, so that we could sort of have a place where we can list, sort of link all the different hangouts that are going on. So hopefully it might make it a bit easier for all of us to find when hangouts are happening, because if people have got a place where they can come in and drop a link to their hangout, preferably before it's starting and stuff like you can create a place for people to do stuff. Anyway, that's a separate topic, sorry. But the point is, I've sort of talked about this publicly, and then all of a sudden up pops this situation such that it's distracted me for several hours now. So in that respect, the reason I say who has the bone, as in the bone is the object that is taking up your attention. Whether that bone is a person or a thing or an argument, whatever, it can represent all those different things in a metaphysical sense, just using it as a totem to represent your attention being drawn away by this thing. So balancing that time consumption compared to what you had been planning to do already, or what you could be doing, not necessarily planned for, but if you're involved in this kind of environment, maybe you could have spent that time, like I could have watched 2, 3, 4 documentaries, average time length 90 minutes, 2 hours. So I could have sat and done some research, could have read several articles. I'm not a very fast reader, so I can't say I could have read a book. I might have been able to if it was a short one, but I know for other people who can read quite quickly, you could have read an entire book in that time, in those several hours that I've spent doing this. So is this situation popping up just to absorb your attention, to wave a bone at you and get you to chase the bone? These are all considerations that, if you're bothered, should go through your mind. As I say, if you're in that sort of frame of mind where it's just like, oh, what silliness, click ban, goodbye, carry on, then obviously, don't have to worry about it too much. But if you look at the situation and think, this is going to cause me problems, or this is going to ripple in some fashion, that it's going to end up coming back on me, so I need to address it in some fashion, I'm speaking from my own point of view in that sense. In this situation, I feel it's relevant in that way. So, expending that time and energy, if you get to that point of making that choice that you want to do something a bit more than just ban and ignore and move on, how do you address the bone? Do you really need to address the bone, or do you address the person waving the bone at you? A person might not necessarily be one singular person or whatever, but hopefully you get my point. That could be maybe relative to you and the situation that's occurring for you, but I think it is a bit of a general truism that most of the time you won't actually need to address the bone. You would probably be better off going straight to the source of the situation. I mean, this is just in general group interactions with people, general relationship senses and stuff like that. If something comes up like that is creating that kind of distraction and division and conflict and whatever, you're better off going to the person that seems to be having the problem with you, and saying, oh, okay, what's going on here? That kind of conflict resolution. Let's all be happy, joy. But sometimes, I say sometimes, I feel a lot of the time, you may find that it's by trying to address the bone or trying to deal with the bone, you're not actually getting to where the problem is. And if somebody is doing this kind of stuff to you for malicious reasons, then the bone will keep changing form and it will keep moving. So you'll never be able to catch up to it, and you'll never be able to deal with it, because once you think you've dealt with one shape of the bone, it'll change shape into something else. You'll have to start the whole thing all over again, and yet more time is consumed, yet more energy and your attention, etc., is consumed in the process. So look at the situation. As I say, it's going to be relative for you and the situation you're in and what's going on. But do consider that the bone itself may not necessarily be where you need to direct your energy to deal with this situation. Sometimes I feel that maybe in what I've done here with what I'm doing with this lot, it may be the most helpful or the most constructive outcome to deal with the situation is to go at a tangent and do something that is, although related to the situation, you are sort of skirting it, almost like slingshot gravity effect around a planet or whatever. The gravity of this thing is attempting to pull you in. If the person is doing this in malicious fashion, then most definitely that is what they want to happen. They want attention, they want to slow you down, they want to distract you, derail you, throw mud at you such that you feel like you're struggling to move anywhere forwards, because you've got to constantly deal with this stuff that's dragging you back again to go over and over the same arguments, that perpetual argumentation, ad nauseum, going over the same points of I'm trying to remember that quote. Trying to argue with a man who's given up his reason is like giving medicine to the dead. I'm not sure if that was Thomas Paine or I should have checked before I said it, but it just came to mind, so these kind of situations will often be like that, especially if the person is doing it for malicious, disingenuous reasons. They will keep moving the goalposts. So no matter how you try to approach it, reasoned arguments, evidence, whatever, they'll just go, no, it isn't, and you have to keep peddling and keep peddling and keep peddling. And that's what they want, because while they've got that distraction from you, you're not off doing the other stuff that you could be doing. I think there's probably things about that kind of aspect that maybe I haven't thought to mention at the moment. Maybe I might come back to it, but I think that there's sort of enough on that point. I think it's somewhat obvious. I was just hoping to point out how this kind of distraction from this stuff is very often the whole reasoning behind it. In this situation that we are in at the moment, on this internet environment, with all the new legislations that are being brought in, the politically correct social engineering that's been stuffed into people's heads, such that more and more people are finding it harder and harder to have genuine, honest communication and interaction, because everybody's pushed into this box of fear where everybody else out there is an agent, a shill, a troll, an extremist, a non-violent fundamentalist, whatever else. And then of course the system plays on every little difference it can. So, you know, one religion isn't meant to talk to another religion, and racial divides and all that kind of stuff. To trying to get past this situation, as we find ourselves in now, you know, this virtual environment is, I feel, very much part and parcel of our lives now. It's very difficult to actually stay away from it. And I don't mean in the sense of wanting to do it because, you know, you find enjoyment or something. I mean in the sense of it's getting harder and harder to just live your life day to day without having to come into this environment at one point or another. You know, you can restrict that to a large degree, limit your exposure to it, as it were, but that is getting harder and harder. And in a cultural sense, it's more and more accepted and normalised and fashionable and trendy for people to actually be doing things in this virtual world rather than doing them in the real physical world. So rather than meeting up face to face and talking to each other, where the whole communication effect can take place, because communication is not just verbalization, that is being separated to further individuate people. So for the malicious trolls and agents, potentially, because they are out there, I'm not denying that, they are most definitely there. That is the way the current situation is becoming so bad. They need to carry out that kind of activity to derail you, to slow you down, to stagnate you, so that you're not succeeding or making progress in doing the kind of thing, speaking from my own point of view, doing the kind of thing that I do, you know, trying to share information and get people talking and stuff like that. They know very well, they've been well prepared for the dominance and spread of this virtual environment, and the simple reality that because of its interconnectivity, it means we're all going to start communicating more. So they're getting in there and making sure that they keep us all fragmented, distracted, arguing amongst ourselves, you know, divide and conquer. So as I'm winding up to my time limit again, yeah, who has the bone and what is the bone may not necessarily be the bone itself that you need to address to solve your situation. I'll be back for another video, I'm sure, fairly soon.